Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Yeah.
It's all about the Benjamins, baby.
Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about Taming the Street by Diana Henriques. The Old Guard, the New Deal, and FDR's fight to regulate American capitalism. I've read a few things that Diana has written, and I love them all. She signed them all. I was at an event, and Diana Henriques signed this copy for Ryan with best wishes. Also at the event was Frank Portnoy, who wrote a couple books I've read. One I've done a review on here, The Match King. So check that out. The other books Diana has written, I read before I started doing BookTube, so there aren't any reviews of them, but I really enjoyed them. And before I start, why am I wearing pink? So much pink. This is my T20 Middlesex cricket jersey. I brought this up a while ago. When I was in London, check out the vlog. I went to a T20 match at Lord's cricket ground, and the home team was Middlesex. That made them my team. This is the T20 jersey. I went to a T20 match. This is a T20 hat too. When I got back, I decided I should get a jersey, and I did. I got a couple jerseys, which I've worn in different videos here, but I couldn't find the right size T20, and they were sold out. And then I waited, and a couple more came in, but they were like the smaller sizes. I was like, hey, I really want this jersey, this pink T20 jersey. When are they going to get them in? But I also didn't know how the seasons worked for the different kinds of cricket. Eventually, I reached out to their public affairs people, and their PR director let me know that they had one this size in storage. And if I wanted it, I could have it. I had to pay, but it would be mine. They were never going to get more in for this season, so this style, because they changed a little bit between seasons. So I bought it. It took a little while to get here. It got stuck in customs in the UK and had to come back. But eventually it made it. So I got it. I'm really happy that I got this one. And it's a lot of pink, I know. But we are at the tail end of cricket season in the UK. And since I had gotten this recently, I better wear it before the season's over. So that's it. That's why I'm wearing it. So Diana Henriques, her last name, Henriques. I went to school at the Coast Guard Academy. We had a room called the Henriques room, and it changed names, pronunciations, at least 3 times. It was a room you didn't want to go to. It was the old library in the really important administrative building. But it really, important things happened there that you usually didn't want to be a part of, like a court-martial or an honor board to possibly kick out a cadet. You didn't really want to go in there. It was also surrounded by really high-ranking officer offices, so just as a cadet, you want to avoid that. But sometimes it was called Henriques, sometimes it was called Henriques, sometimes it was called Henriques. So I have to admit, every time I see her last name, I kind of go through the progression of names, and I'm always worried that I'm settling on one that was one of the room names, but not how she pronounces her last name. All right, so on to the book. Taming the Street. It is set during the New Deal, really begins before the crash of 29, the stock market crash of 29, and the Great Depression that ensued. It bounces around a little bit in the timeline, but it's really, Diana is following 4 important actors in what came after the crash. And this is really the formation of a number of New Deal programs, but especially the Securities and Exchange Commission. So she goes through some of the acts, and she's following the process through 4 different sets of eyes, 4 different people, important people. Who are the 4 people? Well, first, most importantly, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president. She picks up with him before he becomes governor of New York, and some of the stuff that he did in New York before running for president. And of course, this is a 4-term president, a president that was at the helm for a number of very important things: the response to the crash, the Great Depression, World War II. So Franklin D. Roosevelt. Then we also have Richard Whitney. Richard Whitney was the president of the New York Stock Exchange during the crash. He had just become president right before the crash. He also was the lead partner for Richard Whitney and Sons, which mostly dealt with bonds. And he's an important person. Not necessarily he was an important person in actively trying to create the SEC. He pushed back on a lot of things, a lot of the legislation. He has an important part. Some of that about his conduct, some of it was what he tried to preserve early on. Richard Whitney. He's really the old guard here. Then we have Joe Kennedy, Joseph Kennedy, the future father of John F. Kennedy, the future president, as well as 2 future members of Congress. Joe Kennedy was a speculator. He did a number of things that probably were targeted, by the new regulator. And he was selected as the first chairman of the SEC. And it was a controversial pick at the time because he had been involved in pool operations, and he was involved in film and the liquor industry. This close to the repeal of prohibition. He was involved with a number of things that were probably unsavory while looking through this legislation. But one of the things that I think it was FDR said was it takes a thief to catch a thief. And he wasn't like a total thief or anything. But so there was a lot of pushback on his selection. But it turns out that he did a great job and really started it off right for the agency. After his time at the SEC and the Maritime Commission, he became the ambassador to the Court of St. James. I've done a review on a book about his time as an ambassador called The Ambassador, and check that out. I read that right before I went to London, and his time as ambassador was not nearly as successful, and also kind of ushered in a time where he and FDR were not very close. The last person whose eyes the events are kind of watched through and we follow his actions are William O. Douglas. He was a law professor. He was the 3rd chairman of the SEC, and he would eventually become an associate justice of the Supreme Court, one of the longest serving associate justice of the Supreme Court. A number of sayings that he had have really stuck around: keeping a shotgun behind the door to use, the SEC being the investor's advocate. So these are the 4 people that we see focused on in this book. There are a number of other people that are brought up, other players, Tom Lamont at JP Morgan's firm, the House of Morgan, James Landis, the 2nd chairman of the SEC and one of the people who really wrote a lot of the legislation. And we follow not only those 4 people, but also some of the really important pieces of legislation that the SEC enforced, administered, in some cases was created by. So those I'll go through real quick just by name. But the first one is the Securities Act of 1933. That established the reporting requirements for companies that were traded, and it was administered by the Federal Trade Commission initially. The next year was the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, and that is the act that created the SEC. Here is the actual 34 Act, the original one that was signed by FDR. And there were also amendments to the 33 Act, and the administration of the 33 Act was moved from the FTC to the SEC. So that's 33 and 34. And 35, you have the Public Utility Holding Company Act, which is something that I think most people don't think about today, but was a very big deal in the 30s. Then you have the Trust Indenture Act of 39, and then a pair of acts from 1940, Investment Company Act and the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. Two pet peeves, things that I see in a lot of books, and it happened a couple times here. Sometimes people call the 1934 Act, the 34 Act, the Securities and Exchange Act, and it's not. It's the Securities Exchange Act. The "and" comes into the name of the agency, but every so often you'll see the act referred to with probably a little more of the agency added to it. The "and" is only in the agency's name, it's not in the act. So Securities Exchange Act. And then the other thing is investment advisors. In the act, advisors is spelled with an E, not an O. Every so often you'll see investment advisors spelled with an O. So if you ever see registered investment advisors are registered with the SEC, advisors is spelled with an E at the end. Not at the very end, but instead of OR, it's ER. That's it. So those are the only two things that I saw that I was like, oh. But you see that all the time. So I really enjoyed the book. I give it 5 stars. She does a great job of recounting the history. I'm not going to go into the acts or exactly what happened, but Diana Henriques does a great job of framing the events so they're understandable and adding a little bit of suspense into what some people could see as dry events. And I think for me, one of the events that I had read about a number of times before, but I think was more intense in this book, was really the fall of Richard Whitney, Dick Whitney, and the sequence of events that happened where his deeds had come to light and his firm went bankrupt and he was eventually arrested and went to jail. And it was more intense than I had read in the past as far as the way those things came to light, and I really appreciate that. So Diana ends the book talking about modern challenges that the SEC faces, but for the most part this book is talking about the creation of the SEC, a number of New Deal initiatives, and did so through the eyes of 4 different individuals who were important and played key parts. Check it out, Taming the Street. It came out, I think, last week or the week before. Great book. Also, I love that cover. It looks, the border is kind of like a stock certificate design. This stuff, it's pretty. It's so pretty. Oh, and go Middlesex. Have a good one. Bye.
What y'all wanna do? Wanna be ballers, shot callers, brawlers, who be dipping in the bins with the spoilers, on the low from the Jake and the Taurus, trying to get my hands on some grants like Horace. Yeah, living the raw deal, 3-course meal, spaghetti, fettuccine and veal, but still everything's real in the field, and what you can't have now, leave when you will. But don't knock me for trying to bury 7 zeros over in Rio de Janeiro. Ain't nobody's hero, but I wanna be heard on your hot 9-7 every day, that's my word. Swimming in women with their own condominiums, 5+5s who drive millenniums. It's all about the Benjamins. What?